Officially, the Philippines is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And yet, parati natin sinasabi na pag-iwanan tayo ng ating mga kapitbahay, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, some are even saying even Cambodia. Well, the reality is this: we are growing fast. And the one, and arguably the most important element for our long-term sustainable economic growth is energy. Welcome back to the latest episode of Pilipinas 360 Degrees. Pag-usapan natin, favorite natin, energy, right? Speaking of energy, obviously, without energy, walang buhay, walang love life, and importantly, walang national development. So kailangan natin pag-usapan, what is the state of energy or energy security or energy crisis sa ating bansa? Let's break it down. Una-una, before we go to the good stuff, pag-usapan natin yung urgent national energy security problem na meron tayo. The Malampaya plant, which has been for decades a major source of indigenous natural gas for our electricity sector, for our overall economic development, is running out very soon. May mga efforts to develop resources in the adjacent areas of the Malampaya plant. Companies from the Philippines are involved in doing that to make sure na meron tayong more domestic input. But the reality is that we're going to see a significant drop doon sa output from Malampaya plant, which has been extremely central to our national energy security for decades. Now, mahalaga yan because over the next decades or so, or at least over the next few years, gusto natin mag-grow at an average of 5 to 6%. At least yun ang target ng National Economic Development Authority natin. Our population is growing, our economy is booming, but we need energy for that. So what are we doing? Now, with the Malampaya plant actually running out, or at least a huge part of its output expected to drop over the coming decade, the problem is saan naman tayo kukuha ng new energy resources? There's always the option of bringing in more from outside, liquefied natural gas, which happens to be not as dirty or not as polluting as, let's say, coal. But mahal yan, expensive yan. Liquefied natural gas has to be transported across oceans. Qatar, for instance, is the leading producer of liquefied natural gas. But to get it all the way from Qatar to the Philippines and to store it here and to distribute it here, it's not going to be cheap. May economic costs yan. So while it makes sense for the Philippines to bring in more alternative sources from outside, the fact of the matter is that it's a form of dependency itself, even though it's a form of diversification. And even if diversification is the natural way forward, it's going to have economic costs. Dahil nga, hindi galing sa atin yan. Imported yan sa ibang bansa. Sila'y nagpa-profit. Yung mayaman yung mga katulad ng Qatar, hindi Pilipinas. Now, speaking of that, kailangan natin mag-develop ng alternative indigenous sources of natural gas. The problem though is either they are too much in the speculative phase, although we're hoping to find some due to seismic activities doon sa ating internal waters, especially in the southern portions of the country, in the Mindanao region, near the Barm region, in the Sulu Sea region. But the one that we also have to develop is in the reed bank, or yung tinatawag natin na recto bank. And here comes geopolitics. The problem is that over the past 20 years, gusto natin i-develop yung reed bank or recto bank. Ang problema is binubuli tayo ng China. On multiple occasions, the Philippine government, in tandem with foreign companies, including British, Australian companies, and some domestic counterparts, tried to at least do seismic activities, meaning search nila kung ano meron tayo dyan, and eventually develop the energy resources there. Yung reed bank, according to some of the authoritative sources, could be the mini Saudi Arabia dyan sa West Philippine Sea. Ang problema though is China is claiming it as part of the 9-dash line. So, kumbaga, to use a metaphor or analogy, ang nangyari dito is meron tayong time bomb kung saan paubos na yung Malampaya plant. So we need to develop an alternative source. At the same time, parang may shotgun sa ulo natin, meaning China telling us, we're not gonna allow you to develop the reed bank or recto bank unless you share it with us. The problem with joint development agreement, or what former President Rodrigo Duterte called co-ownership of resources in the West Philippines, is that, well, parang mali. Unang-una, it goes against our proven sovereign rights in the area, exclusive sovereign rights in the area per the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal Award. Pag tinignan mo naman yung ating saligang batas, the provisions on national economic patrimony, atin din yan. In fact, tawag natin dyan, recto bank na. Because we believe it's very much an extension of our national territory. Now, there were efforts to have joint agreements with China to develop the reed bank, but it didn't go anywhere because it would go against yung ating saligang batas at saka yung 2016 Arbitral Tribunal Award natin. So negotiations over a service contract or joint development between China and the Philippines during the previous administration went nowhere. In the meantime, paubos yung Malampaya plant, and in the meantime, yung China, binubuli pa rin tayo to share yung reed bank with them. That is an untenable situation, and something has to be done about it. Alam mo guys, yung parang sinasabi ng China is along these lines. What is mine, what is yours, we share para wala tayong problema. Last time I checked, China did not offer the Philippines, or any foreign companies for that matter, a kind of a joint stake or joint development agreement in places na kasama sa kanilang exclusive economic zone. Pero biglang pagdating sa ating exclusive economic zone, China is saying, oh, let's be friendly and let's share it and everything will be fine. That's not gonna work. For some of us who have been married or in long-term relationship, you know it's never fair when your partner says, what is mine, what is yours, we share, and then let's all be happy. Well, that's not fair. It's untenable. And it's against international law at saka yung ating saligang batas. So what should we do now? Dapat klaruhin natin sa China na tayo lang may karapatan dyan sa reed bank or recto bank, and we'll do anything that is necessary to develop our resources there in spite of China's intimidation. Ang nakasalalay lang dito is not abstract international law or ating national pride. We're talking about potentially trillions of pesos of natural gas and oil resources dyan sa reed bank, which we cannot develop because binubuli tayo ng China. So while the time bomb of the Malampaya plant is about to go off, we're dealing with the shotgun of China forcing us to share it with them just because they have this fake claim based on their 9-dash line, going all the way, cutting all the way into our exclusive economic zone. Having said that, as we will discuss with our good Secretary of Energy, we're hoping to also develop other plans, other areas whereby we could find oil and natural gas medyo sa loob naman and east of Palawan at medyo malayo sa West Philippine Sea. Let's hope for the best and let's look at what technology and what our private sector can do in order to avoid geopolitically sensitive areas as we try to diversify and also develop our indigenous sources of energy. But for me, the reed bank is the big one and we should not sleep on that. When it comes to the issue of energy in the Philippines, one big problem we have is we have had decades of privatization. Ibig sabihin, yung mga kinokontrol ng gobyerno dati para sa interes ng ating bayan ay binigyan sa private sectors or so-called oligarchs. Next thing you know, guess what? The private sector did not meet the targets when they said, oh, pag binigyan mo sa amin, ma-privatize yan, ito mga bibigay namin sa inyo. Mas mura, mas efficient, blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen. Worst, in certain cases, when we privatize it, it not only ended up within the control of so-called oligarchs, it ended up within control of potentially hostile elements. Case in point, look at the NGCP, the transmission machine, essentially, of Luzon, which was privatized during the Arroyo administration. And guess who ended up effectively in control of that? A Chinese state-owned grid company. Officially, they only have 40% of the NGCP. But anyone who's familiar with the engineering and technical aspects of this, basically the idea is China has 40% financial stake, but 100% technical control. Considering what we have with the Chinese when it comes to the West Philippines disputes and considering concerns about malign interference, considering concerns about China's backing of trolls, the many things we discussed in our previous episodes, especially with our good friends from the Department of DICT, I don't think it's wise for the Philippines to privatize it per se, but even worse, privatize things to a country like China. So I welcome the move by the Maharlika Fund to do something about this. Perhaps the Maharlika Fund could be more useful and less controversial if it does something with the Chinese stake in our national grid. But when it comes to privatization, it also went wrong on so many different levels. There are people are saying that during the Ramos administration, we privatized many key sectors, including our electricity sector, including our telecommunications sector, and most importantly, yung sector natin when it comes to provision of petrol. Many people are saying that, well, on the paper, it's market-driven. Yung presyo ng gasolina, ng diesel, nakikita natin, it's a reflection of market conditions. So, kunyari, may giyera sa Middle East, sa gitnang silangan, biglang sasabihin ng mga companies, kailangan namin itaas yung presyo dahil may giyera dyan. Even though we know, yung binebenta nila sa akin, binili na nila nung isang buwan pa, right? In fact, if you talk to a lot of honest people, including people I've talked to at the Department of Energy of the Philippines throughout the years, some of them, even on the record, would admit that they're not 100% sure if yung price determination ng supposed free market natin is really a reflection of the true prices dapat ng petrol, diesel, and gasoline. Many people are thinking that we have an oligopolistic situation whereby a few big companies are juicing the rest of the country. But there's also the aspect of taxation. VAT on energy resources, VAT on electricity, that is also contributing to the high costs. And that brings me to one important issue, guys. Manufacturing. Pag tinignan natin ang Pilipinas, isa sa mga dahilan na napag-iwanan tayo ng mga kapitbahay natin is this. Yung mga kapitbahay natin, especially Vietnam nowadays, but earlier Thailand and Malaysia, and increasingly even Indonesia, lahat po sila, they are growing by leaps and bounds. And a lot of that has to do with manufacturing investments. Kung ikaw may Toyota, for instance, or even Honda and some of the Japanese cars, most likely, unless it's a Lexus, it's actually imported from Thailand or Indonesia. You see, big Japanese manufacturing companies, not to mention European, Chinese, and Americans, they have huge plants, manufacturing plants in Thailand, in Indonesia, or Vietnam, the kind of mini China of our region, and new manufacturing superpower. And ang kagandahan ng manufacturing sector is this. It can provide a lot of jobs for a lot of Filipinos, and you don't need to have an engineering degree or a PhD or a perfect American accent as a requirement, for instance, to go into call center jobs. In fact, as Danny Rodri and many leading economists have been mentioning, manufacturing investments is the best way to lift nations out of poverty. Pag tinignan mo, most of the first world developed countries today, you can go from Switzerland to Sweden to the United States to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and China increasingly, lahat po sila ay nag-rely on manufacturing to lift hundreds of millions of people and throughout time, billions of people out of poverty. Ang problema sa Pilipinas is that we're so dependent on the services sector. Retail, malls, real estate. And unfortunately, those sectors are not going to create the kind of jobs that we need in order to provide good employment for the vast majority of Filipinos. In fact, we're also extremely reliant, for instance, on remittances and on business process outsourcing, call centers, among others. But there are tens of millions of Filipinos sana who could end up working in a Toyota factory in Philippines. Remember, we used to have the Ford company, I think, in Santa Rosa. We used to make a lot of Vios. Hopefully, we're going to make more of Tamarao, FX. Now, imagine this. If a lot of these cars, itong mga kotse na binibili natin sa Pilipinas, sana gawa sa Pilipinas mismo. At least yung 80% na igawa sa Pilipinas. At alam mo naman, pag nagtatrabaho ka dun sa mga pabrika ng mga manufacturing na yan, hindi kailangan na expert ka sa AI or may PhD ka sa computer science. People with relatively modest skills can work in these companies. And ang kagandahan ng mga manufacturing investments that they give good salary, they give good income, they give you a lot of benefits that you're not going to get working for a lot of malls here and a lot of businesses here kung saan mahilig sila sa contractualization. Now, I'm not going to have a long conversation on the issue of contractualization, but what I'm saying is that we are creating growth in the Philippines, but it's a very low-quality growth. To have a high-quality growth, you have to bring manufacturing, but to bring in manufacturing, you have to bring down the price of electricity, utility costs, among others. How do I know that? I got to talk with Japanese investors, American investors, European investors. All of them, they tell me the same thing. masyadong mahal yung utility cost, electricity among others sa bansa nyo, and your infrastructure is not good enough. So something has to be done about that. The Philippines cannot fulfill its full potential, cannot move from lower middle income to upper middle income and hopefully high income in the next decades kung hindi natin ayusin yung energy foundations ng ating ekonomiya. Yun po yung vulnerabilities natin. If we want to catch up with Vietnam, we want to keep up with Indonesia, and eventually reach the level that Thailand has been able to achieve, well, we have to get more manufacturing investment and we have to fix our energy problem. Lastly, ako taga Baguio ako at alam ko sa Baguio, we have had the Texas instrument like forever. So alam ko, we Filipinos can actually engage in high quality manufacturing, quite complicated things. The next thing I want to do is the Philippines getting involved in other things. For instance, EV, battery production. But the other thing I also noticed, well, as an Ilocano, is that I also saw those beautiful windmills in the northern part of the Philippines. And last time I checked, I think that was part of an investments by Danes and some of the major companies in the Philippines. But, when I saw those windmills in northern Philippines, in the Ilocos region, I said, sana ganyan sa buong Pilipinas, right? We have proven throughout the decades that actually we have an ability to develop our renewable energy. During the Marcos Sr. regime, for instance, there was a significant increase in our geothermal and renewable energy capacity. So much so that we were the leading nation in terms of RE, renewable energy, as a share of our overall energy production. We were almost like a world leader. And I believe we can move in the same direction. And it's quite sad to see from almost 40% of our total energy production being RE, we're now down close to almost 20%. That's almost a 50% drop in the contribution of renewable energy. But now, with all of this development in solar panel technology, in storage capacity, in battery capacity, in transmission capacity, sana eventually we can go back again to where we were starting 40, 50 years ago as a renewable energy, geothermal energy superpower in Asia. Kayang-kaya natin yan, and I hope to see more of those projects also by our government because this is the fact. Isa tayo sa mga pinaka-vulnerable, if not pinaka-vulnerable countries to climate change. We should demand dun sa mga first world countries who have been polluting our atmosphere and creating greenhouse emission and contributing to climate change. They have to help us with adaptation funds. They have to help us with transitioning our economy towards renewable energy. But in order to do that, we also have to show them and we have to remind them that we have been doing our part. Not only is our carbon footprint on a per capita basis among the lowest in the world, meaning actually hindi tayo masyadong nagko-contribute sa global climate change and global warming, but more than that, we are doing the right thing and we deserve more help and assistance from the rich world and the industrial world who have been really the culprits of climate change. They should give us the kind of investments we need to transition into a much more renewable, much more green, and much more sustainable energy infrastructure. And why not seeing more electric cars and electric transportation-based systems in the Philippines? But just to give an idea, medyo mahirap talaga yung ating energy sector challenges. And in fact, if you look at the Philippine Energy Plan from 2023 to 2050, it is 3 volumes, guys. And that just gives you an idea how complicated, how daunting the challenge is. But at the same time, I'm quite confident we have the right persons in power and the right persons to talk about the energy challenge and opportunities for the Philippines, including our very good Secretary of Energy, who we will interview shortly. Salamat everyone for joining us for the latest episode of Pilipinas 360 Degrees, kung saan pinag-usapan natin the many dimensions of energy security, challenges and opportunities for the Philippines.